Okay, so we can, cool. So we've got some people joining, which is exciting. Thank you guys for joining. We'll probably start officially maybe at 1 minute past or so, just to it's quite a lot of people registered today, so let everybody join. I think so obviously Richard's on, we'll do a proper intro later, but Richard and I were talking about potentially doing some online courses now that we've got extra time. So Richard, what would your course be?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I think just anything that's around the why behind design, anything behind why people are doing the actions that they are performing in a certain way, always does capture my interest. Or just any insider stories, I suppose, of how people are tackling challenges and just trying to share knowledge and advice.
And how about if it had to be extracurricular?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I have been trying to learn the bass guitar rather unsuccessfully.
Very cool answer.
Yeah. So, well, you haven't had me play, so not quite so cool.
I'll see if I can convince my better half to let me play the drums or something. We can see what we can do.
I've got that one. I've got that one down. That was the reason to shift to the bass. Like, kind of drummers, they always don't always get the best reps. So
certainly not at home. The electric ones. Awesome. So just I see quite a few people have joined now, guys. We're going to probably give it just 1 more minute because we've got a lot of registrants today and a lot of attendees now, which is great to see. But just give everyone maybe 1 more minute. We're just talking about silly things rather than that being the content. Yeah, I don't know what I'd do. Maybe I quite like cooking, so maybe I could try and improve that and minimize the failures.
Yeah. Have you cooked anything you want to mention, Chris, during lockdown? Any successes?
Well, and it doesn't count as cooking, but I was actually pleasantly surprised with. I had to go at making my own sushi, which I appreciate is more of an assembly job. But it actually looked surprisingly good when you kind of sliced them up. So I was quite pleased with that. I mean, it did take absolutely ages. So I now appreciate why it's so expensive.
Yeah.
Oh, Phil says that drums are far from silly. Cool. All right. I think we're already almost ready to start. So something I always like to ask those that have been is who's our furthest listener or watcher. We're in the UK this time, no one from Berlin. But who feels that they might be furthest from London online? As I say, I think the record was Australia and then San Francisco. I don't know which is further, actually. But we'd love to hear from you, of course. Cool. So I think it's probably time to kick off. So thank you, everybody, as always, for joining. This should be a really, really exciting session. So we have Mr. Richard Trigg from Tangent, and we'll be talking about sort of how to be more scientific with your approach with respect to design and such. So I'm really excited to listen to it. We, as always, record the session. So obviously we want you to stay to the end, but if for any reason you have to drop off, we'll share that. And obviously feel free to share that with anybody else you think that should have attended as well. Do be interactive. So we've got our chat and options to ask questions as well. Field them. I'll kind of digest them and fire them off at Richard at the most inappropriate time to try and trick him. Do make it immersive. It's a really great presentation. So I'm excited. Without further ado, Richard, I will pass you the mic.
Great. Well, thanks, Chris. Well, and thanks for everyone for joining today. So what I wanted to talk about really was just share some of my experiences and the tools and techniques that I've been using and we use at Tangent and within our design teams and with our clients to take a more scientific approach to design and try and just eradicate some of those decisions that we maybe make around assumption and that are not always based on fact. So I thought I'd kick off by just sort of giving some context as what's being a scientist got to do with design. And I think I'm in quite a good position where I do get to go out and speak with lots of clients, lots of different design engineering teams. And I just sort of have a feeling that, people are struggling with the test and learn, the experimentation approach. There are obviously some companies who are, way ahead, but I've sort of pitched this today more as like, well, how can we get started? What are some of the things we can do just to overcome some of those little lumps and bumps where we do make decisions not always based on insight? And how can we really get away from relying on what I'm going to call big bang launches, where we just build something, we launch it, and we hope that it's going to work. So from what I've seen, I think the reason we keep having these big bang launches is that innovation is quite often dictated down from the top by senior stakeholders. And I've definitely seen a lot of this still happening within the industry. I've still been involved in some of it, as well. It is a challenge to get away from it. But the way it generally goes is a senior stakeholder has an idea, and that might be an amazing idea. It might be a pretty bad idea, but because they're quite senior and they've got the power to push it through, inevitably it will end up happening. And then the process generally is the idea gets briefed into the design team. We create lots of different solutions, and then for some reason we critique them via assumption and opinion into a single final solution that we go ahead, develop, QA, and then finally launch. And I guess at that point we sort of get that slightly nervous moment where the night before it's going live, we all start praying and just hoping that what we've created is indeed going to work, and we're not actually going to go ahead and actually piss all of our users off and have a big backlash. The second is just around, I guess, design cultures still not quite being set up to support and encourage failure. It's not really a natural thing to think that we want to fail, but it is actually one of the most important aspects of learning anything. When we were growing up and we were starting to walk, when we turned 2, we didn't learn how to walk by just being perfect. We bumped into a load of stuff. We broke things. And error and failure is a really major important part of learning and improving. I still see lots of cultures that don't actually or are not set up to support this. And it's no secret that many of the world's most successful companies, the ones we talk about all the time, Amazon, Netflix, they've obviously already been doing this for a long time, and they have it very, very embedded within their strategy and the culture. So it's a real obvious thing for companies to look to try and do. And if you can leverage it, and if you can be successful at it, I think your success will follow the same path as these other companies. So how do we get started? How do we actually go about sort of starting to build and take a more scientific approach to design? And the starting point for anything is to really define and understand what you're doing. And one of the ways of doing that I think works really well is to try and create a North Star metric for your product. So it's basically a metric for the thing that matters the most. It's a measure of success for the product team within the company, and it should define the relationship between the customer's problem and the problem the product team is trying to solve. And it really shouldn't be anything to do with revenue. It should be something that's actually tactile and something that we can link to an experience we are trying to deliver. So I've got a few examples here of some brands that we all engage with and products that we use regularly. So Spotify's North Star metric is time spent listening. And if you use the platform, you'll obviously see that they spend a lot of time developing their algorithm to make sure that when you finish that track, the next one is queued up and it's going to keep you listening, keep you engaged, keeping you feel like you're getting value for the premium subscription that you are paying for. Airbnb, number of nights booked. So if you go back to their original tagline of live like a local, obviously they're all about making you feel very comfortable in that environment, wanting you to be there almost more than your own home. So how can they enrich that with the experiences they provide? How can they make you feel truly, truly like a local? And then finally, I guess it's quite an obvious one, but Amazon Prime. We've all seen the shift in their model to trying to get us to buy everything on that platform. And they're really focusing on how many monthly active users they have. So how many little products we're buying and just trying to cut out all those other stores we might have used in the past. So if you want to go about thinking about how you could create your your own North Star metric. A great way to do that is to sort of ask yourself these 6 questions. So maybe get a little group of you together and try and start seeing where you end up if you follow this ladder. So when is it the point that your customers actually reach their end result? So again, this is not about revenues. And when's that point when the experience you're providing, they're actually in an enjoyable place and they've achieved what they wanted to set out to achieve by using your product? Does this indeed apply to all of our customers? And very importantly, is this moment something that we can measure? Because as we're doing our testing, we want to be able to see if we're gaining and improving our North Star metric. What's the best frequency to measure? Should we be doing it weekly, monthly? And do external factors have a minimal impact? And if we grow the North Star metric, will our business grow too? So once we've defined that, and we know what we're trying to achieve, which is, often the case that people don't. I've definitely met people and talked to people who aren't aligned with what they're actually trying to achieve. So it's not to be underestimated. But then we can go about starting to analyse our current performance against that North Star metric. And I personally just really like to do that. And I find I get a lot of success from doing that with an expert review. So either myself or a number of other designers within the team, defining a journey within a product that we want to analyse and just putting ourselves in the customer's shoes, clicking through and highlighting the errors that we think, or the friction points that we can see within the journey. So it might be issues with navigation, it might be performance issues, it might be error states, help and advice. There's lots of great articles out there on expert reviews, heuristic analysis. So have a little look around on those, and there's frameworks you can follow. I then combine that personally with just a top level view in GA, really looking for where those blockages might be within the journeys, looking at behavioural flows and trying to find pain points that I can then narrow in a bit more detail and actually start to build my hypothesis for areas we want to change. And this is an example of a client we were working with a little while ago. So they are called Hippo, and what they actually do is provide these big, large yellow bags. Some of you might have seen them. You can buy them in hardware stores, B&Q and so on. And they're basically an alternative to skips. So the idea is you might be doing a clearance, you don't want to ring up and wait for a skip to arrive, so you can nip out, you can get the bag quickly, fill it up, ring them up, and they come and collect the bag. So they've been doing very well in store, but they weren't doing so well online. And they came to us to look at a bit of a review and try and understand where people were maybe struggling within the journey and what changes could we make to actually increase online conversion. So this was the original component that users were faced with when they had to decide what size bag they wanted to use for their rubbish collection. And I'll just show you some of the things that we highlighted and some of the areas we felt there was for improvement. So initially, you can see the names of the bag: midi bag, mega bag, hippo skip. If I blindfolded you, you'd struggle to tell me which one of those was the biggest. So from an accessibility point of view, something we wanted to tidy up, so it was just a bit clearer in terms of what bag was the biggest one. People really struggle with estimating the size of things online. I think this is a great example of that. So if you were in between one of these two bags, would you have the confidence to know exactly how much I was going to fit in a midi bag or a mega bag? And as you go up the range, the prices get more expensive. So we're adding friction by adding significant extra money on in terms of actually getting someone to convert. And then the labeling: how long's a yard? How heavy is a ton? I think if I asked you all of this, you'd probably all come up with a slightly different answer. So we need a bit more help and guidance there to help people evaluate and make the right decision. So we built out these hypotheses. We actually went away and did a lot of usability testing around this as well, which further proved that these were definitely areas that people were struggling with, and either driving them to go and look in store at the bag or reach out to another support service. So this was actually one of our design variations that we ended up going with after that research. And there were just a number of things we learned here that were really interesting. Weirdly enough, if you put a human in a bag, people have they seem to be able to estimate the size of it much better. So that was something we used throughout. Also, if you put a household object, e.g. an armchair, into the bag, people can relate to that, and they really started to latch on to what the size of the bag actually was. We added the small, medium, large tags alongside the bags. Obviously, they were branded terms. They didn't want to lose that. But then I guess one of the most interesting things that it actually happened a bit by accident, is we just set about making the pricing really clear. So we had this radio button that showed the cost of the bag on its own and the cost with bag and collection. And to be honest, we talked a lot before. We were a little worried throughout the process and during our testing, we didn't have a huge amount of scale within the usability testing we were doing, was that people were actually going to go for the bag only. But actually what happened was the total opposite. This really increased conversion towards bag and collection. And I think it just came down to the honesty around the pricing, and people just really being able to better evaluate what they were getting for their money. So once we've got those hypotheses, we then use lots of other different research methods to help prove or disprove them. So this is another really great little example of an e-commerce store. And this is one that was really not very clear around the cost or the timing over shipping. And we know that shipping is one of the prime reasons for cart abandonment. The site and the journey wasn't doing a very good job of just educating people on the fact that shipping was free, and there were other options, and it didn't actually take that long. Standard delivery was 1 to 2 days. So in the top right-hand corner there, you can see the first stage of the checkout process that didn't actually tell you how long standard delivery was. So you couldn't evaluate as to whether you needed to pay the £10 or not, when actually it was only 2 days. And then on the product pages, there was no information about how long shipping took above the fold. It was actually all below the fold, which people were missing. So we used a platform called Usability Hub, which has a number of different products on it. But the one we used was a 5-second test. So it's a platform where they have a panel that you can recruit to as well. Very low cost, so definitely recommend checking it out. We put this image up on Usability Hub and we asked 100 people, how much does shipping cost? So these were the options they had to choose from. And what we saw is that within that 5 seconds, they were just totally missing this banner at the top here. And only 16% of the people we asked actually got the correct answer and realized that shipping was free on all orders. So very quickly we managed to prove that hypothesis and really show that we needed to make a change and make it clearer how much shipping cost. Navigation is one of my favorite areas to look into, but it's always a little gold mine of opportunity. I think navigation can always be improved. And another great tool for doing that is a product by Optimal Workshop called TreeJack. And the way that works is you can build out a navigation tree, much like you were clicking through a series of folders, and you can then ask the user a task. Again, they've got a panel you can recruit from. And then the user nominates where they think they would find that piece of content within the tree. And it records where they click first, when they go back, how direct, and so on they are within that journey. And this was an electricity company we were working for. And it was a semi-successful task, which is why I've included it, because I thought it'd be interesting to share what we did next. So the task was, you're about to purchase a house and there's an electricity pole in your back garden. Your friend said you can get compensation. My face is coming up there a little bit, so if I get the words wrong, where would you click to find out if it's true? And you can see we actually got a reasonable success rate of 50%. Obviously room for improvement, 50% of people are still getting it wrong. But you can see the time it was taking and the directness for people to find that answer was taking a little bit longer than we'd like, and they weren't that direct. So what you can do with the tool then is look at what's called a pie tree, which shows you all of the routes that they went down, where they clicked, when they went through that task. So the correct answer was, in this navigation design, was to go through contact and go to your rights to equipment on your land, which some people were getting right. But what was more interesting is they were obviously going off on a lot of different ways, which maybe means our first labeling isn't that clear. But it was this word safety, which really was our key learning from this test. We learned that having an electricity pole in your garden from a business perspective was not unsafe. It's not an unsafe thing. but people just presumed that it was, and that was the word that they were attaching to this problem. We actually ended up using that word safety quite a lot throughout our navigation for things that the company didn't deem to be dangerous, but we thought people might. It ended up being quite a successful tactic for us to get people on the right path. And there are lots of tools out there to help you quantify your hypothesis and get answers quickly. And EyeQuant is one of those. Nothing to do with plugging the guys at all. It's generally a tool that we really like to use. So this is an example of the shipping example I was talking about earlier. And this is a perception map which uses EyeQuant's AI algorithm to show where people would look within the first few seconds of a page loading. And you can see here that they're drawn towards the model's faces, which is exactly as we'd expect, but because of the design and the layout of that banner, they're not seeing it at all. So I think even a few little tweaks to maybe removing content there or actually removing the contrast of that could just help make that a little bit more prominent. And that was backed up by our other research we did on Usability Hub. Also interestingly on this site, so this is an attention map. And you can see here there's a title at the top of the page that introduces men's coats and jackets. And the copy under that is quite like SEO focused, shall we say. So it sort of says men's coats and jackets range from formal to casual with refined wool overcoats, tailored max, technical raincoats, blah, 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 blah. Which is fine. We may well need that copy from an SEO perspective, but it's obviously taking up quite a large amount of real estate on the page before we get into the content. And in terms of where people are looking, they're jumping straight to the product. Very few are really noticing the filtering. And again, this is something that came out in other testing that we did of people missing this filter. And again, another learning that sort of came out by accident on this was where people glance first within the grid of images. So you can see on this example, they're going down to the second image first. And you think, well, that's quite a loud shirt. So maybe it's to do with that. It's got nothing actually to do with the placement of the images, but it is the same on a grid with 4 quite beige products as well. So potentially an opportunity for placement of products that we want to recommend or based on personalization to users that we think they might be interested in, or higher value products that we want to try and shift. And then finally, I used to work for Decibel, so I thought I'd give them a little plug as well, but other tools are available that do this type of thing. I think it's just useful to have a suite of heat maps, session replays, and so on within your toolkit. One of the ones I find the most useful is a scroll map, especially on mobile, just to check if content is visible to users when we're going through these design, viewing designs at scale. What is that key content around shipping but actually being missed by 50% of users? If so, it's very obviously a problem. So I think building out a list of hypotheses and identifying opportunities for change is relatively quick and easy nowadays. But one of the hardest pieces is finding out deciding what to actually do next. Click this. Sorry, I thought it was going to jump to. That was me earlier. And a framework for doing that is the PI framework. So it's where you assess a hypothesis based on its potential importance and ease to help you achieve your goal. So potential is all about, does this improvement align with our North Star metric? Importance is how valuable is this traffic to this page? So is it a page that we're spending a lot of money driving traffic to, or is it just generally a page that receives a lot of organic traffic? And then finally, ease. How easy is it going to be for us to make this change in a design and development from a development lens? But I think it's also there to think about political. Some things are actually quite hard to change due to political reasons. And if you just score those out of 10, it starts to bring to the top the ones that are actually maybe the areas you should be focusing on first. And it gives you a good guide as to areas of focus. So it's now probably one of the bits that I enjoy the most with the design teams is now thinking about lots of different variations. And variation is really important within design. And I think within the Big Bang examples we were talking about earlier, you often get focused on finding the solution quite quickly and trying to deliver one perfect design. This is a methodology called Crazy Eights, which is in Jake Knapp's Sprint book, which was quite very popular a year or so ago. If you haven't read it, definitely some good COVID reading, so I'd recommend that. But Crazy Eights is a methodology where you have a problem, you get a group of people together, you give each person a piece of paper, folded up into 8, and then you have 30 seconds to come up with one solution for that problem you're trying to tackle. After those 30 seconds are over, you move to the next quadrant within the paper, and so on and so on. So within 4 minutes, you've actually generated quite a lot of different ideas. And it's always amazing me what you can do when you put under a little bit of pressure. 30 seconds doesn't sound like long, but have an idea, throw it away, have another idea, throw it away, have another idea. Just a really good way of starting to think outside of the box. And it's always when you get a little bit further away from your original idea, you start to find some slightly crazier ones. And I think that's really important within design, not just to copy the competition. If you want to be innovative, try and just get away from that first idea, challenge yourself to come up with another, because inevitably there'll be something good in there, a little bit of gold that you want to take forward. So this is an example of us playing around with some variations of design in this e-commerce setting. So this was the original current design, quite plain. So we came up with another option. You'll notice the navigation is hidden here, which was, we felt was a problem, something that we wanted to expose. So this was using more of a vertical navigation technique. How could we then flow that out across the page in these sort of stripes? How would that affect the layout? Trying to bring out reduced clicks in terms of sizing, so you could just flick between the different sizes and make that all a lot quicker. What if we went for a more traditional horizontal navigation approach? What if we started to bring in some more little hand-drawn or tactile features, try and add a little bit of personality to the brand? Or what if we did something totally different, something that just wasn't as you'd expect, rely more on the imagery and try and really show the details of the product off as you viewing this page. And there's loads of tools we use to test, to get feedback on this. I guess A/B testing is one of the ones that I think people talk about a lot of the time. But in this instance, because it was quite early within our design process, we actually used Usability Hub again. So you can do comparisons on Usability Hub. So we put these options out to 100 people, and we just asked the question, which design feels the easiest to navigate? The first one being the original, and then A and B being our 2 alternate navigation options that we were playing around with. And I think you can very quickly see how it's fairly conclusive, actually, that actually people do just like to see that categorization of the navigation. We got a real strong indication here that actually it's probably worth looking at what's the impact to invest in moving away from that hamburger menu. Can we actually start to look to a more substantial navigation approach? We did the same thing with these two, where we said, does this page give you all the information needed to be ready to add to bag? And the results from these two, weren't great on either, really, if I'm honest, and they both scored pretty low. So we asked a follow-up question, which was, well, what's missing? And this is where there was, a load of really interesting information came back. So people were talking about, well, I want to know about the material, the designer. How has it been sourced? Is it environmentally friendly? And that's a really interesting thing from a brand point of view, to be talking about how this shirt came to be. Other stuff, as you'd expect, so sizing, materials, the value behind it, how it fits with other products, which are all pretty standard e-commerce things. But it just very quickly goes to show how doing that small little bit of research, we've already been round the loop. We've now got our next set of ideas for things that we want to go ahead and put within that design. And that was all in a pretty short time period, if I'm honest. So I think it just proves the point about that rinse and repeat. Keep going around that loop as much as you can. So if we just go back and remember Jeff's original quote at the beginning of my talk, success at Amazon is really about continual experimentation. And I think that's the point that I want to sort of finish with today, really, is that once you get started, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. but you will learn and you will get successes from putting experimentation more at the heart of your design process. So testing something is better than nothing. And my advice really would be just set yourself a target to start doing some tests. So big or small, maybe next month, say we just want to do one test and we'll see what happens from it. And we'll start to feed that back into our process and start to look to remove some of that assumption and get things started. So thank you very much for listening.
Brilliant, Richard. Thank you so much. So yeah, everybody, feel free to ask any questions. We've got a couple already. One of them was around the fear. So when you've got a website that's working well and it's been in place for a while, and what was the politically correct way you mentioned it was the
ease, yeah.
The most important person is very scared of making a change when things are working. How do you navigate a situation like that when you feel that actually there is lots of improvement to be made?
Yeah, I think you just got to start having that conversation, and maybe it's about taking it off the actual live environment. So like those tools I shared there, they can all actually be done independently of running you don't need to run an A/B test and actually interrupt things live to do that. Mm-hmm. So I would just find a problem that's really close to their heart and then try and apply one of those tools to it, and then go back and have the conversation and show what you've learned, even if it doesn't end up being successful, like the example of the page with what needs to be added. Then you've all of a sudden, you can capture their imagination, their attention, you go and keep iterating on that basis. So I guess it's just about trying to start the conversation, but maybe do a bit of work in the background to go with some insight and show the value that insight can bring.
Great. On the last week's webinar, we did a poll, which was around how mature you are as a sort of team or organization when it comes to experimentation and testing. And it was interesting. I think the options were really new to it, doing it but need to be better, or we have a full program in place. And nobody actually went for the third one, and it was about 50-50 split for the other two. So if you're kind of really embarking on that scientific approach and using tools, what would you say is kind of the easiest sort of low-hanging fruit, or the things you might want to start doing?
Yeah, I think that is always one of the key challenges. I think I would always start with making sure you're aligned on that objective. And I guess it's how big you make that objective. The North Star metric we were talking about. Try and find something that's a little bit micro, something that you can actually really influence within a defined, not a huge journey, something you can have an impact with a few pages or a page. And then I think just start small and start to push it out and build up.
So would that be maybe on a sort of a lower ticket page, or do you think higher ticket because you'll see more impact?
I mean, traffic is always one of those things depending on the type of test you're running. But again, if I don't think you want to start. You don't want to start on something that doesn't matter to anyone. You need to find a group who's got an interest in the thing you're going to test. So people are going to get excited when they start to see change. If you're really down in the weeds where no one really cares on a page that doesn't get any attention, then it's probably not the best starting point. But
great.
I think it's a hard question to answer because it's different from company to company.
Sure. So know the audience is I'm hearing.
I think so. Yeah, know the audience and find something that's going to be of interest to one of the people within that audience that is you can play around with.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've got a question from Paul. Thanks, Paul. It says, given how costly user research and tools can be, what are your tips for quantifying the value of the research to get it approved?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're not all expensive. I guess it depends what tool you're looking at as well, right? I think some of them can be. Some of those tools I talked about there do actually, they don't have a subscription model. You can use them on a one-off basis. So maybe look a little bit more around the market as well, because I don't know if you're referring to A/B testing tools and some of those, or some of the the all-in-one products that do have quite a substantial price tag. There are alternatives to that, so have a look. And the second part of the question, sorry, can you refresh me, Chris? What was the
So
second
it
part?
was, so given how costly user research and tools can be,
Yeah.
your tips for quantifying the value of the research to get it approved?
I mean, so I've seen, obviously I have worked at quite a large analytics tool in the past. So I sort of, I've seen the ups and downs of that. I think you need to be realistic about, do you think you're going to get value from it? Have you had a good proof of concept with that tool? Have you proved that it's going to work? And try and do some models around what do you think, the value of uplift and what you're going to get out of it is, because I think you need to take responsibility for that. And if you can prove through a sample, a proof of concept that a lot of those companies will enable you to do, if you engage in a serious sales conversation with them, and they'll help you through that process. So I would say try it out, prove it yourself. And then if you should then get the numbers, you should be able to go back and have the discussion.
Yeah, and also just my 2 cents, and I'll take my EyeQuant hat off for a second, but when you're looking at any kind of tools, there is an element of leap of faith at some point, but if you spend enough time with them, that being maybe the sales teams, or actually it's quite clever to ask to speak to the account managers before you start working with them, and really bring some examples to the table that you're passionate about, and ask them to show you in real life how that works and interpret the results thereafter. That's quite a nice way of you actually seeing it for real. And you can even bring data to the table, stuff that you've tested before, and see whether that would have sped up that process or reduced the impact of whatever might have been negative before.
And I think that's the key point, isn't it? I think account managers and sales people in those types of companies are always keen to hear your problems. They want to know the problem you're trying to solve. So I think the more you can get that across, the more they're going to be able to help you, and hopefully arrive at a natural point where it's either going to work or not, right? And I've certainly had it with good tools where they turn around and say, well, maybe this isn't actually quite right. And I guess that's just the honest relationship that you want to be able to go forward.
Yeah, I mean, again, I apologise because this isn't supposed to be about EyeQuant, but one thing that does come to mind, which was actually quite funny, which links into your point about the most important person in the room and the view. I'm not going to mention the company's name, but it's a very famous sofa company that we've seen all over the TV. And it was on their homepage, and there was this big internal dispute about should we have this zebra print cushion on the sofa or not. It's not clickable, so it's very hard to track the impact. And they were coming to us to try and evaluate whether we can add value to these things. And so we just did that work for them, and showed them the results. And they kind of went running to the boss going, I told you so. All the attention's going towards a zebra print cushion that's not even one of our products. And so it depends on the value to you in the situation, but to them, just having a voice and saying, look, design is important and this is not a good call, was enough for them to find it, to get it approved in your question there. Great. Okay. We have another question. I think slightly similar to earlier, but I think still worth covering, which is how do you get buy-in from senior management to build a culture of experimentation? This is actually an interesting theme from last week as well, but I suppose those that are, a bit one removed, why is experimentation so important?
Yeah. I mean, again, I would say pick a period of time, pick something that's close to the person you're talking to's heart, and try and get approval to run it for a time box, and then have regular check-ins throughout that process to show them the value of it. I think there's just showing is always better than sort of just explaining something. So yeah, I would try and find a way to start small, but get some actionable results that you can present back. I think would be my advice.
Okay, Brill. I'm just checking if there's any other questions. We have an email option as well. No, okay, so we did have another question, which was, I know you'll probably enjoy answering this one, which is, what do Tangent do, and what exactly is Richard's role with respect to them?
Yeah, no worries. So I'm experienced design director at Tangent. So I'm lucky enough to work with a lot of other talented designers, strategists, researchers. So we get involved with clients in a number of ways. The first is helping them optimize their current digital experiences. So we do a lot of work around the things I've been sharing there. So we will do analysis, consultancy around looking at how products can be improved, going out, talking to customers, looking at data analytics and so on. And then the second piece we do is around actually realizing new products. So if a company's got a new ambition, something new they want to launch to the market, we help them find the angle for that, help them position it in the right way, help them decide what pieces should be within scope, what pieces add value to users, what pieces don't, and then deliver that in terms of both design and engineering. So we do the full end-to-end launch.
Brilliant. I think that's probably all the questions, and hopefully that gives you some colour on Tangent. Certainly, we're a big flag waver, as you can probably tell. I'll just quickly sum up, and then if we have any last questions, I'm happy to throw them in. So don't give up on asking them. But thank you so much, Richard, for today. That's super insightful and certainly on point with the kind of topics people have been asking us to talk about. So I really hope, like me, everyone that attended has taken away some really cool kind of tips and tricks that you can actually try out, and let us know. And obviously, Richard, how you got on. Any questions that you didn't want to ask in the chat, certainly reach out to Richard or us, and we'll answer those. And we'll share this recording online. Usually, it takes about 24 hours to get it out to you. And just a quick note. So the next 2 weeks worth of sessions will be running. So in 2 weeks' time, we'll be having Aviva come to talk to us about how they kind of strategize and build out their design teams and goals. And then next week it's slightly different. Actually, we're going to get Melina, one of the CSMs here at EyeQuant, to teach you about how to interpret the results from using EyeQuant. So it's not just about how the tool works. It's more about once you've got the data, how can you actually action that and make decisions. So it actually is a very, very a nice follow-on from this session. I'm sure that's why Alice selected it. But I hope to see you all there, and thank you very much. Let us know if you want any topics being covered, and likewise if you've got any speakers in mind. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Richard.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.